السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثارهم إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. صدق الله العظيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. ونصلي ونسلم عليه وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه بجهده وتضحيته قام هذا الدين فرضي الله عنهم أجمعين. This is a reminder. This Juma is going to be short and we're going to combine with Salat al-Asr. In this Juma, we wanted to reflect on the importance of knowing who Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is. And it's important that we accompany our understanding of who Allah is with hope. We had talked about this issue of hope before and the issue of fear. And it's been something that we've been talking about in the community. Because there's so many things that happen to us that we may begin to have despair. We may begin to fear that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is not with us. Or we may begin to fear that we took a loss in life. Like, for instance, we lost a loved one that was dear to us. And it doesn't make sense to us. Why is it that that person died at this point in time? And we may begin to look at that and begin to have the idea, Allah, why did you take this person at this time? And it's normal that that type of thinking may come, but as Muslims, we have an opinion of Allah which is the best opinion. And in order to have a good opinion of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we have to tie our hearts to those ayat of the Quran and those ahadith which instill in our hearts a good opinion of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That's extremely important. Because when the musibah comes, when the challenging time comes, when the hardship comes, we don't know how we're going to respond. And so our response may not be the response that's going to help us in the situation. Our response may be the response that may make the situation worse for ourselves and those around us if we don't have a good opinion of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. In the Quran, we find that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala uses beautiful language. قُلْ يَا عِبَادِي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. The language here is a language which shows that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala cares for us. That Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is talking about you, each one of you, in relation to himself. Ya ibadi. Here, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, say, O my servants, who have been excessive against themselves, do not despair of Allah's mercy. And then here we find a follow-up. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا. That is the correct aqeedah to have of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That's the correct belief that we should have. Here Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is making sure that you understand He has a relationship with you whether you like it or not. And the command here is don't despair. And then you're taught the point. All of the sins that you may commit, Allah will forgive. Here when it says, الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ, those who have become excessive against themselves, is basically those of us when we follow our desire or when we follow the whisperings of shaitan and we find ourselves now where we what? We're harming ourselves. And we mentioned this before, that the issue of deen, if it's to be understood in a healthy, clear, sound way, is that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala doesn't need the deen from you. Get it out of your head that Allah needs you. Get it out of your head that Allah needs your deeds. Get it out of your head that you go into Jannah solely just because you're a Muslim and your deeds. We go into Jannah by way of the rahmah of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We go into Jannah by the favor of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, by the love that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has for us. That's the opinion of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That's an opinion in which we find ourselves in a situation in which what? We begin to have an understanding that our relationship to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is not one where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala wants to harm us. Is not one in which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is intending bad for us. There's things that may happen to us that may feel that way, but here we have in the Quran a clear lesson that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala wants good for us. Therefore, when we find ourselves in the state in which we may sin against Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, it's not good to continue to be in that state of mind where we feel there's no forgiveness. Some of the Muslims have an understanding, and we're going to have to come back to these issues in another khutbah, that if a person sins, they leave Islam automatically. That's not a clear, sound understanding. If a person sins, they may feel as though they left Islam. They may feel as though they left Islam. Why? Because the impact of sin on our lives is very real. We begin to not understand what goes on within ourselves and in our lives when we don't have a clear understanding of who Allah is and who we are as Muslims and how it is that the deen, how it is that the way of life that we call Islam is instructing us about how to understand ourselves. That's the first mistake that we have, many of us, that we think that if we fall into a sin or if a person falls into a sin, that they automatically left Islam. The other issue that we have is that we begin to think that sin has no impact or effect. It has an impact or effect. And we see it because we find more and more people, especially when they do something and they know that it's haram, they begin to feel so guilty and they keep that within themselves, especially young people. that they fall into mistakes, they make bad decisions. That doesn't mean necessarily that they're bad people, but they made a bad decision and they fell into a situation that's haram, and they keep that within themselves secretly. No one knows except themselves and Allah Ta'ala and whoever it is that they reveal that to. And they begin to feel worse and worse, and they carry that with them throughout their lives. And that is what leads to some of the depression that we see amongst some of our youth. And not only our youth, our adults. We're seeing adults that are 40 years old, 20 years old. What they did in their teenage years, they're not allowing the mercy and the love of Allah and the forgiveness of Allah to have an impact on them. So they think that they have the power of Allah Ta'ala. If Allah Ta'ala is saying that all sins are forgivable, if Allah Ta'ala is saying don't despair of the mercy of Allah, then this is where we take the lesson in humility. Who are we to approach Allah Ta'ala with the attitude that Allah can't forgive us? So we have a point here that is necessary to understand. In the hadith we find, ittaqullah haythuma kunt watba' as-sayyi'at al-hasanah. This is a rule that is very important. Wherever you're at, in whatever situation that you're in, be clear what your relationship is to Allah Ta'ala, what you should be doing. And we mentioned this before because it's in your benefit. If you're not clear about what you should be doing in a situation, then it's mostly possible that you may find yourself taking a decision which is going to injure you, which is going to hurt you, which is going to have a negative impact on you. So the hadith says, wherever you find yourself in, whatever situation you find yourself in, even if it's the worst of situations, be clear with yourself. How now I'm in this bad situation. How should I be acting towards Allah Ta'ala? Because clearly Allah sees me in this. And if you fall into a situation in which you find yourself that you committed a sin, follow that up with good deeds. If you stay stuck on the sin, if you stay stuck on the bad deed, then most likely Shaitan will keep reminding you of what it is that you did, and you will find yourself in a situation of despair. You find yourself in a situation where you won't know how to exit that. That's why it's important that when we find ourselves falling short, even from the basics of the salah, when we find ourselves maybe in our salah we're not so focused, maybe in our salah we're not making it 100% on time, this is the role of the sunan. The role of coming in to the masjid, like before dhuhr, you pray a couple rak'ats before dhuhr as an example, and a couple rak'ats after dhuhr, that you sit after salat al-dhuhr and you make some dhikr. Why? Because you're strengthening yourself. Allah Ta'ala doesn't need your ibadah. Allah Ta'ala doesn't need your worship, but you need it in order to be in a position where you're good with yourself. You need to be conscious of Allah. I need to be conscious of Allah. We need to be conscious of Allah so that we're good with ourselves. That's why, for instance, when the month of Ramadan comes and is coming, the more good deeds that we do, we find ourselves in a better state, in a better spirit. We find ourselves with a natural happiness if it is that we are implementing good deeds, if it is that we're struggling to come close to Allah Ta'ala. So we can't afford to have that mindset, people, where if we fall into mistakes or we fall into sins, we stay stuck on that and, well, I'm a bad person, I'm a this. And it's the same thing with our parents and their children. If they have done something is not good to keep reminding them about the bad that they did. When the Prophet ﷺ, when he found himself doubting himself at the beginning of Wahy, when he found himself trying to understand what it was that was happening when the Quran was being revealed, take the lesson from Khadija, our mother, radiyallahu anha. She didn't remind him, alayhi salatu wasalam, of deficiencies or why is it that you're doubting and this and that. She reminded him of the good person that he is. And the Prophet ﷺ necessarily didn't need to be reminded of that. But what about the person that has lost their way with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala? Don't they need to be reminded of the good that they do? Don't they need to be reminded of hoping in Allah? Don't they need to be reminded of forgiveness from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala? And the benefit of that forgiveness for them. We all know that the reality of the hellfire exists, and we all know that the reality of punishment exists, but most of us are not clear with certainty that the love of Allah exists. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we ask you to forgive us our sins. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we ask you to help us to have a good opinion of you. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we ask you for those that have died, from our brothers and our sisters, from the old and the young. We ask for all of those who are sick, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala for those who have been problems in their families. We ask that you alleviate their hearts, especially those couples that are going through divorce. We ask you, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, for all of our youth, strengthen them and aid them and help them and give them a sense of happiness. We ask you, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, for our elders that are lonely. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, we ask you for the Muslims, the poor Muslims everywhere in the world. And we ask you, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that you allow us to die in the state of Islam. Aqim Salah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Allahu Akbar. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. We're going to combine our sujood, inshallah.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please, those of you who are exiting out, exit out silently. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. We have a few announcements. We're going to be starting a program February 3rd from the masjid on learning how to prepare for marriage and strengthen your relationship. It's going to be 7:30 to 8:30. And we have snow tubing at Mountain Creek on February 27th, which is a Sunday from 12 to 6 o'clock. 10 years and up, we invite all of the youth to come to that. Snow tubing trip at Mountain Creek, February 27th, 12 to 6 o'clock. ICRA institution has an open registration with classes, so we encourage people to participate in that. And there's a youth halaqah tonight, I believe, depending on the weather.